Walk into any grocery store and you can grab beef, pork, chicken, lamb, even bison if you're feeling fancy. Every one of those is a plant-eating mammal that humans figured out how to raise, kill, and sell for dinner a long time ago. Here's the strange part. There's another massive plant-eating mammal roaming this planet right now, one that can weigh over 4,000 pounds and packs more usable meat per animal than almost any other land creature alive. And somehow, we never touch it. You've probably never eaten hippo meat in your life. You've probably never even seen it for sale anywhere. And that's not because nobody ever thought about it. In 1910, the United States Congress came within a single vote of making hippo meat a normal item on the American dinner table. That's not an internet myth. That's documented government history, and it might be one of the strangest near misses in the history of American food. So today we're answering the real question. Why did an animal that almost became a national food source end up completely off every menu on Earth instead? Rewind to 1910. America is in the middle of what newspapers at the time were calling a meat crisis. Cattle prices are climbing fast. Ranch land out west is shrinking. The country's population is growing faster than its beef supply can keep up. Meanwhile, down in Louisiana, there's a completely unrelated disaster happening. An invasive plant called water hyacinth has taken over the bayous. It's choking rivers, blocking boat traffic, and killing off native fish populations. Nobody can figure out how to get rid of it. Then a Louisiana congressman named Robert Broussard comes up with an idea that sounds like it belongs in a fever dream. Import hippos from Africa. Release them into the bayous. Let them eat the water hyacinth clogging the rivers. Then farm them for meat. Two massive problems solved by one animal. He wasn't just some lone dreamer either. Broussard brought in real experts to back him up, a famous frontier scout and a former war veteran, to testify in front of Congress about why this plan could actually work. Newspapers ran the story with genuine excitement. One major paper described hippo meat as a kind of lake cow bacon and predicted it would become a staple on American dinner tables within just a few years. The proposal became known as the American Hippo Bill, and it almost passed. It failed in Congress by a single vote. Sit with that for a second. One vote stood between hippos becoming ordinary livestock in the southern United States and the world we actually live in, where hippo meat sits in almost total obscurity. So if an entire room full of lawmakers genuinely believed this could work, why has nobody pulled it off since? Why isn't hippo farming a real industry anywhere on Earth, even in the countries where hippos already live in the wild? The answer starts with something most people get completely wrong about this animal. Most people picture hippos as slow, lazy, half-submerged blobs floating peacefully in a river. That image could not be further from the truth. The hippopotamus is responsible for more human deaths in Africa every year than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. Estimates put the number at around 500 deaths annually. And some researchers argue the real figure is even higher, since so many attacks happen in remote areas that never get officially reported. On land, a hippo can hit speeds close to 20 miles an hour in short bursts. That's fast enough to outrun most humans, despite the animal weighing as much as a small truck. Their bite force has been measured at well over 1,800 pounds per square inch, strong enough to snap a canoe clean in half. And here's the part that makes them uniquely dangerous. Hippos aren't defensive animals waiting to be provoked before they attack. They're territorial. And in the water, that territory belongs entirely to them. A boat that drifts into the wrong stretch of river doesn't need to do anything threatening to get attacked. Simply being there is enough. This is the first wall that stops hippo farming before it ever gets off the ground. You cannot herd an animal like this the way you herd cattle. You cannot fence it the way ranchers fence livestock, because a hippo can push straight through most barriers without even slowing down. You cannot handle it the way farmers handle other animals, because there is no safe way to get close to a hippo that wasn't raised in captivity from birth. And even those hippos remain dangerously unpredictable once they reach adulthood. Zoos that keep hippos follow extremely strict safety protocols, specifically because keepers have been killed by hippos they had cared for and known personally for years. But let's say somehow you solve that problem. Let's say you build the perfect containment system and figure out a way to raise hippos safely at scale. There's a second wall waiting for you right behind it. And this one is entirely biological. Hippos reproduce incredibly slowly. A female hippo doesn't even reach sexual maturity until she's somewhere between 7 and 9 years old. Pregnancy lasts about 8 months. And after all of that, a mother typically has only one calf every 2 years, sometimes longer. Now compare that to cattle, which can start reproducing around 15 months old and produce a calf almost every single year. From a pure business standpoint, hippos might be one of the worst possible animals anyone could choose to farm. The turnover is far too slow, the risk to the people working with them is far too high, and the infrastructure required to contain them safely would cost more than the meat itself could ever be worth. If cost alone were the only obstacle, that would already be enough to kill the idea. But there's a third wall, one that nobody in that 1910 congressional hearing room could have possibly known about. In 1987, health officials in Uganda traced a serious anthrax outbreak back to a single source. Villagers had butchered and eaten meat from a hippo that had died naturally along a riverbank. Anthrax spores can survive in soil for extremely long periods, and they can be picked up by grazing animals. Hippos spend so much of their lives submerged in murky water and thick mud that they're far more exposed to environmental bacteria than cattle raised on dry, open pasture land ever are. Since that outbreak, wildlife health researchers across several African countries have documented similar cases tied directly to hippo carcasses. Enough of them, in fact, that some rural communities now actively avoid hippo meat they find in the wild, rather than treating it as a free source of protein. And even if you somehow set the disease risk completely aside, the meat itself creates another problem entirely. Hippo meat is extremely dense and fatty, closer in texture to pork than beef, but it's wrapped in incredibly thick skin and a heavy layer of fat underneath that can take hours of slow cooking to properly break down. In parts of Central and East Africa, where hippo has historically been eaten as bushmeat out of necessity, it's almost always prepared through long stewing or smoking, never quick grilling. The raw cuts are simply too tough and too fatty to cook any other way. That might be a fine tradition for small-scale, occasional hunting, but it's a nightmare for any kind of industrial meat supply chain built around speed and consistency. Now, layer conservation status on top of everything we've covered so far, and the picture gets even more complicated. The hippopotamus is currently listed as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Wild populations are estimated to have dropped by double digits over the past few decades. Poaching for their ivory canine teeth, habitat loss along African rivers, and growing conflict with expanding farmland have all pushed their numbers steadily downward. Several countries have already restricted hippo hunting through strict regulations, specifically because their populations simply can't handle sustained pressure. An animal that's already struggling to hold its numbers steady in the wild is not exactly a strong candidate for industrial-scale farming, no matter how much meat it theoretically produces per animal. And in case any of this feels purely historical, there's a modern case study that proves the exact same set of problems all over again. In the 1980s, drug lord Pablo Escobar illegally imported 4 hippos to stock the private zoo on his estate in Colombia. After his death in 1993, the Colombian government seized the property, but nobody wanted to deal with the hippos. Moving a hippo means tranquilizing an animal that can weigh 2 tons, then somehow transporting it without killing it, or anyone standing nearby. It's expensive enough that officials simply left them exactly where they were. Those original 4 hippos have since multiplied to well over 150, now spread across rivers and lakes in Colombia's Magdalena Valley. Researchers project the population could climb into the thousands within a few decades if nothing changes. Colombia has spent years debating what to actually do about them. Culling programs have been proposed and then abandoned after public backlash. Sterilization campaigns have been attempted, but tranquilizing and treating even a single wild hippo can cost tens of thousands of dollars and require a full team of specialists working in genuinely dangerous conditions. And here's the part that says everything. Nobody has seriously proposed turning them into a food source, even though this is about as close to a free, fully established, unmanaged breeding population as you could ever hope to find. If there were ever a real-world opportunity to test whether hippo farming could actually work at scale, this is it. And even here, with the animals already loose and reproducing entirely on their own, the exact same walls show up. Too dangerous to approach, too expensive to handle, too disruptive to manage safely. So here's the twist in all of this. The American Hippo Bill wasn't defeated by common sense back in 1910. Nobody in that congressional hearing room knew anything about an anthrax outbreak that wouldn't even be documented for another 77 years. Nobody had measured hippo bite force or studied their reproductive rates the way researchers have today. They lost the vote by one single ballot, almost by pure accident. And it turns out that accident happened to be right, for reasons absolutely nobody in that room could have possibly known at the time. Every single wall that makes hippo farming impossible today, the aggression, the The painfully slow reproduction, the hidden disease risk, was completely invisible to the people voting on it back then. Congress got lucky, and more than a century later, the hippopotamus remains exactly what it has always been. Not some future food source quietly waiting to be discovered, but one of the most dangerous animals on the entire planet. One that very nearly ended up on dinner plates across an entire country for reasons that had nothing to do with taste and everything to do with an invasive plant that nobody could get rid of any other way. So next time someone tells you an idea is obviously a bad one, remember this story. An entire branch of the United States government came within a single vote of building a national hippo meat industry, and it took nearly a century of science we didn't even have yet to prove why it never could have worked. If this story surprised you, imagine what else is hiding in the history books that nobody talks about anymore. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you have voted yes on the American Hippo Bill back in 1910, knowing only what they knew at the time? And if this video changed the way you look at your dinner plate, hit subscribe, because the next story is even stranger than this one.